Good morning and welcome to the Vicarage here at Penn, hoping you're well and cheerful, and happy Tuesday to you. Hope, like me, you're looking forward to another day with God in God's presence. Thank you for your kind messages on our anniversary yesterday. We both had a lovely time. Thank you very much indeed. And let's say, looking forward to today too. Now, buildings in the church, I think I'm not overgeneralizing when I say we love our buildings. And in the Church of England, we have some glorious buildings. We have some amazing cathedrals and abbeys across the country and some beautiful churches. And I have to say, our church at St. Bart's is a beauty. I love being it. It's a great place to be. And I think in lots of ways, it's right, we love our buildings. They are great places for us to meet and have fellowship together and worship in. They can speak of the glory of God. Sometimes just being in a place looking sort of, wow. And I think the third thing that they could do also is help us to pray. There's some lovely buildings and being able to pray in there is great too. And a fourth thing also, somehow being in an old building kind of connects us with the past as well. So, I mean, we love our buildings and I think it's right that we do. Now, our reading this morning in that respect is quite interesting because Jesus is in Jerusalem. And as you know, he's been rattling cages and there's been a lot of byplay between him and the leaders. And he goes into the temple and people start talking about the beauty of the temple, and Jesus' response is quite interesting. Here we go. I'm picking the story up from yesterday. It's Luke's Gospel, chapter 21, and I'm starting to read at verse 5. When some was speaking about the temple, how it was adorned with beautiful stones and gifts dedicated to God, Jesus said, "As for these things that you see, the days will come when not one stone will be left upon another, all will be thrown down." They asked him, "Teacher, when will this be? And what will the sign be that this is about to take place?" He said, "Beware that you are not led astray. For many will come in my name and say, 'I am he,' and 'the time is near.' Do not go after them. When you hear of wars and insurrections, do not be terrified. For these things must take place first, but the end will not follow immediately." Then he said to them, "Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There'll be earthquakes, and in various places famines and plagues, and there'll be dreadful portents and great signs from heaven. But before all this, they will arrest you and persecute you. They will hand you over to synagogues and prisons, and you'll be brought before kings and governors because of my name. This will give you an opportunity to testify. So make up your minds not to prepare your defense in advance. For I will give you words and a wisdom that none of your opponents will be able to withstand or contradict. You will be betrayed even by parents and brothers, by relatives and friends, and they will put some of you to death. You'll be hated by all because of my name, but not a hair of your head will perish. By your endurance you will gain your souls." And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I'd like from Steven Spielberg here to get the film rights for that one. Anyway, as I said, they're in the temple and people are glorying in the kind of glorious medieval perpendicular here and the beautiful building here and the stones and so on. And Jesus' response is quite interesting. That, soon, there will be a time when not one stone will be left upon another. Wonder what the Disaster Advisory Committee would make about that. And I think there are three things briefly I want to say that this morning. Firstly this, I think somehow Jesus supernaturally knew what was to come. Because in 70 AD, which is only about 40 years after this, that exact thing happened. The Romans came to Jerusalem and they smashed the place up. And there truly was not one stone left upon another. So in one respect, Jesus prophesied what happened only 40 years later. That's the first thing. Second thing is this. A temple is a place where you go to be with God. And the temple used to be the place where you went to be with God. And it was destroyed. But actually, what Jesus did is his body became the new temple because when he died and he rose again, right? The moment of his death, the curtain in the temple was torn in two, okay? Which meant that God, who had before been hidden behind the curtain, was now able for all of us to worship. He didn't have to go through that way anymore. So actually, what Jesus did is by worshipping in Jesus, if you like, is the new temple. And because Jesus is everywhere, it means that we can worship everywhere. So in a sense, Jesus is the new temple. He's the place where by being in him and loving him and living in him, we can worship in him, if you know what I mean. That he becomes, if you like, our new temple. So we do not need fancy buildings anymore. What we need is Jesus. Buildings can help us, But Jesus, if you like, is a new temple because in him we can worship. So there's two things so far. Firstly, I think Jesus knew that somehow it was going to actually happen, that 40 years on the place would be destroyed. Secondly, Jesus is the new temple, and in him we can worship, and in him we can do it anywhere, not just in a fancy building in Jerusalem. But I think the third thing actually is I think a bit of a warning to us too, because much as I love buildings and much as I like the security of them and the beauty of them and the link with the past and so on, the trouble with them is they can become places in which we can become very complacent. If we live all our time glorying in the glories of the past, then our faith becomes something which is totally linked with the past. And I think the trouble with buildings is because they are static, because they don't move, then they don't move. And I think actually our faith must not be something which is locked in the past. Our faith has to be something which is alive and now. So buildings are fine, but buildings and our faith and everything needs to be something which is now and not just built totally on the glories of the past. If we live our life constantly depending, we've always been, I'm all right, Jack, we've always been blah, 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 that kind of landed gentry mentality, which we can have sometimes, I think we're in trouble because our faith needs to be contemporary. It needs to be now. Sure, enjoying tradition and appreciating and enjoying the glories of the past, but actually, if our faith isn't active and active now, then it's not right. And I think it comes out also when Jesus says later that persecutions are going to come, and he says, and he makes it clear, do not prepare your defense in advance, because at the time I will give you the words to say. And I think it picks up on that there really, that our faith cannot be just something which comes from the past. Our faith needs to be alive, it needs to be active, and it needs to be now. If we're constantly and totally based on the glories of the past, then we're in real trouble. Okay, I think we have to recognise that. Our faith has to be alive, it has to be now, and it has to be contemporary. So, I love our buildings, and I'm sure many of us do, and quite right too. Jesus had a fairly interesting response here. One, I think he knew what was to come 40 years later. Secondly, he is actually our temple, and in him we can worship anywhere because the curtain was torn and God is everywhere. And thirdly, I think this story serves as a reminder that, my friends, our faith cannot just be something of the past. Sure, learn from the past, appreciate the past, but actually our faith has to be contemporary. It has to be alive, and it has to be today. And so may today you have a lovely day in God's presence. May God bless you.